Hey, Pilgrim friends, it's Pastor Eric, and it's time for Sermon Questions with Pastor Eric. Now, I don't ask these to be a jerk or to test you so much as to encourage you to stay with the Scriptures and benefit from what you heard yesterday even more. Whatever I preach is not the final word on what the passage says. That's not the case. So instead, I encourage us to stick with the Scriptures and to ask questions about them and to discuss these things with each other. That's part of the way the community builds in unity around the gospel. So question number 1, from Romans 16, verses 17 through 20. What surprised you about our reading? What surprised you about our reading? There's got to be something. Remember, we want to come to the Scriptures ready to meet with God. And so God is full of surprises. Name something that surprised you from our reading. Question 2. If the gospel is good news, what is Paul's bad news here? Because there is some bad news. How did you feel about that when you heard me talk about it? So again, the question, if the gospel is good news, and it is, that's literally what the word means, what is Paul's bad news here? And how did you feel about it when I spoke of it that way? Question 3. What bothered you, if anything, about our reading? Maybe something you wish Paul had said differently. Maybe something you think is too confusing to share with an outsider or someone younger than you in the faith. What bothered you about our reading? And tell us why. 4. What does Paul mean by saying Satan will be crushed under the believer's feet? And what Old Testament passages might he have had in mind? And trust me, there's a number. And ask this too, does Paul take away any of Jesus' glory in the victory over Satan, or does he somehow make Jesus' victory over Satan even greater? You can probably guess from my body language what I think about that last one. Question 5. How and when have you seen division in the church? Now, obviously, be careful with this so as to not stir up old conflicts. That's unwise. But I encourage you to think about how you've seen divisions and scandals working themselves out, if not in this church, maybe another church that you've been a part of. Have you seen examples of narcissism or bullying by leaders in the church? And what might the best response to such things be? Question 6. Why might the church in the early centuries after the apostles have overlooked or argued away the originalness of these verses in the past? That is, in the early days of the church, these verses, along with the others toward the end of Romans, had all kinds of variants attested in the original manuscripts. It's amazing to see. It's not this way with some of the central parts of Romans. But why might it have been that some in the early church felt like this wasn't quite original? Think about it and do the best you can with that one. 7, how have you struggled personally with temptations to scandal and division or flattery as a church member? Remember, Paul doesn't say doctrine divides. He said divisive people divide, which sounds so simple, but he's not saying we need to stop teaching and stop instructing or even correcting or rebuking. Instead, he's saying that divisive people divide. So, how have you struggled personally with those temptations in the past? And question 8, it's our last one. What did Paul commend the Romans for? There was something that they were known for and good at. You heard it in chapter 1, and you hear it here in chapter 16. And let me ask you this. Does the answer imply that the Roman churches will have few problems? Thanks.